So welcome to another episode of Newcastle Unlocked. I'm your host, Brent Sinclair, and today we're joined by Dr. Jerry Schwartz, Australia's largest private hotel operator and founder of the Schwartz Family Corporation, which controls over 4,400 beds across metropolitan and regional markets nationally. Dr. Schwartz has been a long-term investor in Newcastle and the Hunter with significant assets, including the Ridges at Newcastle, the Ridges at the Hunter Valley, the Novotel at Newcastle Beach, also the iconic Newcastle Post Office, and a cluster of development sites at Honeysuckle as well. His investments have played an important role in the landscape and accommodation for Newcastle, and more recently he's been in the public spotlight around his long-term vision for the Newcastle Post Office, specifically around timing and plans for that project. So thank you very much for joining us today, Jerry.
It's my pleasure, Brent.
So before we get into all things local in the Hunter, what really got you into investing in hotels and real estate more broadly?
Well, that will probably take up this whole webinar.
The cliff notes, please.
I guess the quick answer is family business.
Okay.
My father was first into residential, then into shopping centres, and then he went into hotels.
Mm.
And when he died in 2000, my mother and I took over the small portfolio, and gradually it grew.
Mm. Wonderful. And where was your first few hotels? Was it mainly focused in Sydney, or did you go more broadly?
Yeah, well, about half of my hotels are in Sydney, and I
Yep.
guess that's just a personal, selfish thing about easy accessibility and not having to travel far to have a look at my assets.
Yeah.
All of them are on the eastern seaboard, two of them in Surfers Paradise, one in Canberra, one in Melbourne, and the rest in Sydney.
And when you're looking at hotels or any investment really, but focusing on hotels, what are the main things that you're looking for? Can you share us some insights? Not too much. You obviously don't want to give away all your secrets, but what is it that makes a great hotel?
Well, I suppose the upside. I'm renowned for getting distressed hotels and making the best of the opportunity of improving them, with some exceptions. I have purchased one or two hotels when they were built as the investor.
Yep.
But in general, I get hotels where I see huge potential. And that's where I get the enjoyment from, actually, of improving on them and bringing facilities and other changes to make them a much better investment.
Mm. And what's typically the way that you add value? Is it through renovation? Is it through just repositioning, or is it around management? Or is it all a combination?
Well, I guess all the above. My particular interest is providing experiences, and of my hotels, three of them at least are resorts where I continually try and put in more experiences. But even in the city hotels, I want to provide experiences. I mean, one example here in Newcastle, for example, is Ridges Newcastle, which is along Honeysuckle Creek. And I've put in lots of kids' activities there. I've got a train that we take up and down the promenade.
Mm-hmm.
I've put a water slide in the swimming pool. I've put a kids' club there. And what I'm trying to do now is put a carousel in the garden near the wedding area. And Newcastle Council have opposed that. And, I think that's a real shame, because that's an experience not only for those that come to the hotel, but it's a lovely thing when you walk along the promenade and you see a nice, colourful merry-go-round.
Absolutely. And look, we're going to get into a bit more about that. And you obviously had some very public, you've been in the spotlight recently over carousels and Newcastle Post Office, so we might sort of come back to that in a moment. But on that, so that's obviously a feature of your hotels. You've got the Ridges there in Newcastle, and you've got such a broad range of offerings across different states. We caught up in 2019, and we're only talking about this before the podcast episode today. It was just before COVID, and
yes, a lot's happened.
Since then, and it's lots happened since then. And I think we cover a lot of topics on this podcast, but How was the journey? What was the journey since our last meeting through the COVID turmoil and obviously out the back end? I suppose focusing on COVID, we've had some recent events with the conflict in Iran, which we'll get into in a moment. But focusing on COVID, what was that time like managing your hotels, and how are the stress levels?
Well, it is interesting, Brent. This is like the sequel. Our last podcast was an 8-minute podcast on YouTube.
Yep.
Prior to the world having changed, and the world did change in early 2020. With COVID, I did notice that there was still quite a few other changes since that podcast. For example, the branding of the hotel and the Hunter has changed. My brewery has increased in size. I've now bought 2 brew pubs in Sydney, and we've expanded on our brewery. So a lot of things have changed. Of course, the major one that's affected everybody was COVID. An amazing time for all of us, and particularly in the hospitality industry. And I guess a lot of the listeners to this podcast and their particular asset class obviously had their challenges, and are probably interested to know the hotel asset class, what transpired during COVID. It was amazing, to see all the hotels closed. I mean, can you believe it? All these hotels closed, all the aircraft grounded, as some of them are now with the war in the Middle East. And, the only hotels that were operating, of my 15 hotels at the time, 2 of them really were quarantine hotels. So that's where I could make the money to pay my mortgage, whilst all the other hotels were closed.
Yep.
I've had my experiences with the banks, like I guess all your readers have had. One bank in particular, Combank, actually wanted their money back in the middle of COVID, which did make life very difficult, because I therefore had to refinance, a total refinance of all my hotels, which, fortunately I got through. I basically just lost one. I had to sell the most recent purchase, which was the 4 Points in Sheraton. Other than that, I guess I managed fairly unscathed to get through COVID.
And yeah, that sounds like incredibly stressful, and you weren't alone, of course, but especially the hotel industry, it took the brunt and pretty quickly, didn't it? And look, how long did that period extend for with, I suppose, the dramatic, look, it's hard to think back now, it's 2026, and I was, obviously there in amongst it, but how dramatic obviously it came in straight away, and then how long did it take to kind of recover to a baseline level that you could at least cover your mortgage and get things back?
I guess we're still recovering in a way. I mean, we still talk about, comparison to pre-COVID levels.
Yeah.
And it was the sort of the scale, the up and down scales that it was probably better in Sydney and New South Wales than in Victoria, when there was shut down for most of the time. But, we sort of got out of it. It got a bit worse. Then the immunisation, it got better, and so on. So it was an up and down roller coaster ride. And what was also so interesting was immediately post-COVID, how there was leisure travel and domestic travel like we've never seen before. And that actually changed the meaning of the different types of hotels. Like I have 2 regional hotels, which have always been the ones that have needed to be supplanted and propped up by the income from the city hotels, but it suddenly turned the other way around. That the regional hotels were the ones that were really going gung-ho, because everybody wanted to take themselves for a short holiday. So literally the world was turned upside down. Having said that, yes, it was stressful, but on the other hand, it was an amazing time. It certainly gave myself, my family, opportunities to spend more time with ourselves and, think things out. I actually have got to admit that I quite enjoyed the time. You didn't have to have such commitments like you have now, and you had more time with the family and more time to yourself. So it was in its way, a pretty enjoyable time, despite the difficulties of the business world.
Well, that's an interesting take on it. Well, that's a good thing, really, isn't it? Beyond the stress. And look, we've, uh, as you say, still recovering from COVID times. And only this week we've had conflicts flare up in the Middle East. It's a little bit early to say, but how's that? What's your take on that? Do you think that's going to have a major impact on, negative or positive, on the Australian tourism market? And have you seen anything even as early as this week?
Well, the first thing is hotels are very receptive to any change politically or geographically. Like if you have volcanoes erupting, or you have uh, possible outbreaks of viruses, or you have wars or anything, it's obviously going to affect tourism immediately. But usually it's pretty quick to rebound. Um, Obviously, we're very concerned now about what's going on with the war in Iran, and it is early. I guess it'll be really interesting for you listeners of this podcast to hear about us discussing this right at the beginning of it. Is it going to last for days, weeks, or years? I mean, who was to predict what would happen in Russia? I mean, that's 5 years and still going. My early responses are, funny enough, just this morning, I got an email from a Sofitel Darling Harbour to say that it's only been a week now, 3 days now since the first attack occurred in Iran, but we're already got 2 inquiries about large conferences, international conferences, being moved from Dubai to Sydney, and they were inquiring about whether they can have their conference at the Sofitel. So, this already shows how disturbances will occur, and let's see how it does play out.
Yeah. Look, it's a very obviously concerning, but curious to see how it will play out on the market more broadly, and only time will tell, I suppose.
We are, I guess, considered a safe haven,
Yeah.
I guess that's fortunate for us. And also too, my prediction is that if the international channels are being restricted, people therefore will return to domestic travel. So, within hospitality and conferencing, we should still see quite strength in domestic travel.
Yeah. Another factors that might be affecting the tourism industry more broadly, how does inflation and cost of living crisis and, we talked about post-COVID, there was a huge boost in domestic travel, then the airports opened up again, and then that obviously died down as well. But how does inflation and other cost of living expenses impact the tourism? And obviously you've got your leisure, but you've also got your business travel. Has there been a noticeable effect from those?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
As I said beforehand, the hospitality industry depends a lot on what's going on politically and geographically, and cost of living, of course, is a big deal because people don't have money to spend. They're not going to spend the money. They're going to be more economical on how they spend the money. As far as conferencing is concerned, this is demonstrated by the fact that previously, when you did have, say, a 2-day conference, they used to turn up to the hotel the night before, have the 2-day conference, and then go home. Now that first night has been pretty much eradicated, and that's a saving issue. And the same thing plays itself out with leisure too. That people are careful about how they spend their money. Like they're going to go overseas, or they're going to go to regional resorts in Australia. And that's, I suppose, why one of my big mandates is to provide facilities and leisure and experiences, because what I'm trying to show is that you don't need to go overseas to experience all the wonderful things that we've got here in Australia. In fact, it's the other way around. People come to Australia from overseas. So if people come to see what we've got to manifest. Why should we go overseas when we've got it all here anyway? It's all in our backyard, so let's take advantage of what's in our backyard.
Yep, you're right. And how is Newcastle performing, or the Hunter and Newcastle performing in terms of day rates, business travel, getting their market share of business travel, leisure travel, over the last, say, 3 years compared to your other hotels? Is it performing well? Has it struggled?
Well, Brent, to make you happy, the answer is fantastic.
Oh, great. That's what I wanted to hear. All right.
Yeah, and that first showed itself actually post-COVID.
Okay.
I was talking about the increase in regional travel. Well, Newcastle was included in that. And, post-COVID, we saw fantastic occupancies in my hotels here, in my 2 hotels here, and in the Hunter, and that's pretty much continued. For example, in January this year, I've looked at the figures, and occupancy in one hotel was 94% with a rate of $260. And in the other hotel was 89% with a rate of $240. And you compare that to Sydney, which is also doing really well at the moment. My occupancy in January was over 90%. And obviously, when you do have high percentage occupancy, you can, with dynamic pricing, push your rates. So, Newcastle has done really well. And of course, it's done well because, not only have we got a lot of leisure experiences here and, dining and the beaches and all that sort of thing, but it's also a great place to have conferencing.
Yep, I agree. The Newcastle Airport's recently expanded to cover international travel, which is a lot of focus about going overseas. But do you see that as a benefit as well for the Hunter in attracting more business customers, open up new routes? Do you have much to do with the Newcastle Airport and the goings on with their plans?
Well, obviously, sure, to become an international airport's great. Has it made much change in our the breakdown of guests in the hotels? Probably not. But certainly what they say, and it's true, is that it's certainly brought a lot of extra trade and employment into Newcastle. So, of course, it's a great thing.
Yeah, excellent. So moving on to the recent public discussions with council about your ridges, but also the Newcastle Post Office. So the Post Office has been a point of discussion for many years. You've obviously had a vision for it, there's plans, but it's a complicated project to deliver as well. What is the plan for Newcastle, the Newcastle Post Office?
No different than it was 5 years ago. It just, I'd keep persevering. And, as the, what would you call me, the curator or, the current custodian of the post office, I think that I'm a good custodian because I'm perseverant and I've got fairly deep pockets to keep pushing. It's had a few custodians in the past. It had the businessman, a Cambodian man called Mr. New, who wanted to put a nightclub there. It's had the New South Wales government that bought it. It had the Awabakal people that took it off the New South Wales government, and then it went to auction, and then it was me. All of them have failed. I haven't failed yet, and I don't plan to fail. It's just that there's a lot of hiccups and a lot of difficulties and red tape in the way, but I am getting there, and I have had the support from Heritage, which is great. They've pledged to give $1 million towards my costs of improving it. It was supposed to be dollar for dollar, but it's not going to be dollar for dollar. It's probably be dollar for $5. But the good thing about that is it's put a deadline on. And as far as the actual facilities that I'm providing, I'm putting 2 amazing museums there. One of them is Miniature Newcastle, which is a large display of trains of the old Newcastle town. They're putting all the old buildings, building them with 3D printing and all the train sets. So that's going to be one exhibition. And the other exhibition, which is the first of its kind in Australia, will be an Aboriginal medical museum. So these 2 exhibitions are the substance for why Heritage Council is giving the money to activate heritage buildings. And what I plan to put on the top floor is a large conference area, which will cater for conferences and weddings and other such facilities. So in essence, it will make the building quite a public sort of building, even though it's owned by a private enterprise. So I am getting there. The current controversy is the fact that the DA will expire in April. It's now early March, so in a month and a half, and the DA has a 5-year expiry period, and that's on the 8th of April. So, the council has said, if I don't pull my finger out and start constructing, then I'll lose the DA. What would that mean? That I'll have to put a new DA in, which would take another 3 years, and then the construction certificate would take 3 years, so that means it'll delay the whole project by 6 years. When you think about it, it's really the council that's going to permit me to commence works, because I'm been ready for the last few years to commence works. It's just I need to get the correct certification in the means of a CC. So this is pretty much
conundrum,
what the discussion is.
And to sort of take that a step further, how is the working relationship with Newcastle Council?
The mere fact that I have to take them to the Land and Environment Court to allow me to put a carousel in front of my Ridges Newcastle doesn't show that the relations are fantastic at the moment.
Doesn't.
And, I really can't see why they're picking on me with regards to the post office. They really should be assisting me as much as they can. It's lovely that the whole of Newcastle know about the post office, but they do not know about the other development that I've got, which is a 180-room hotel across the road from Bridges, Newcastle. Well, I have the same problem there. I haven't yet been given the construction certificate, and I've been going on that for about the last 3 years as well. So all of Newcastle knows about my post office difficulties, and some people sympathise for me, and some people say that I'm land banking and planning to sell it, but they don't know about the difficulties I'm having with my other development. And it's the same story. It's just that I can't get the certification to commence works. And this surprised me too, because I've just mentioned that the occupancy in my hotels has been 94% and 89%. Okay, so there's obviously more room for more hotels, but how can we get the hotels if I can't get the certification to build the hotels?
Well, that was my next question, is that you've got that cluster of sites at, along Wharf Road, and one of them's DA approved, but now you've said that the construction certificate or the certification's the barrier for development. So you're keen to develop that site.
Sure, I'm keen to develop it. So at the moment, it's just used as a storage area and car park, and it's got hoarding around it, but I can't commence works until I'm permitted to commence works. And, this isn't in the Newcastle Herald. My difficulties getting the DA, the CC there. It's in the Newcastle Herald about the post office, but not about the hotel.
So despite the actual timing of it all, is it making you less likely to want to invest in the city of Newcastle if you're getting this kind of...
Well, I presume that all the other investors in Newcastle are having the same difficulties as me. I recall for this particular hotel that I'm waiting for the CC, it took me about 3 or 4 years to get the DA. So things don't happen quickly. I well understand that planning needs to fulfill its obligations and ensure that everything is done correctly. But geez, if they did it a little bit quicker, then Newcastle would develop quicker. I mean, Newcastle is developing well. It's an amazing city, but there's a lot of brakes to slow it down.
Well, it's disappointing to hear, of course. I know there's some complexities to it, but hopefully you get a bit more progress and things happen soon across all sites, of course, not just the post office, which gets the most.
Oh, thank you.
We'd love to see a new hotel. And that brings us to the next sort of point. So Newcastle on the Hunter, you've obviously invested heavily here for years. What are you noticing about Newcastle? Is it, putting aside your issues with development, are you seeing that, is it a maturing market? Is it a mature market, both in the Hunter and the city? Do you think that there's obviously your occupancy levels speak for themselves, but what's the opportunity here in Newcastle City and even the Hunter from a tourism or market point of view? What can we do better, and what's the opportunity?
Well, I think it's a very vested question. Is it a maturing market? Absolutely. And you've answered it yourself. People want to come here and stay here and see what we have to offer. And it is maturing too, because there are a few cranes around. So, development is occurring. What I've always appreciated about it is it's not a big city. It's a friendly regional city that's grown up well. It's got fantastic beaches. It's got culture. It's got industrial sites around here. It's got everything. And I see that too with the conferencing. We have a lot of local businesses and manufacturing businesses that have their conferences, and we've got leisure. It's a good double market. So as far as the hotel industry goes, it's quite ideal. In the future too, reading about the very fast train. Again, that's many years away, but gee, that's going to open up Newcastle to Sydney. And the problem with Sydney is the cost of living. Whilst if you buy a unit or a house here in Newcastle, you're going to not only get very cost-effective property, but it's in a fantastic area.
Couldn't agree more. Well, look, I think that's really covered a broad range of topics for us today, and gives some great insights as to not just what we're reading in the paper, but about how you're trying to activate some of these sites and get through it. So we really do appreciate you coming on to talk all things property, tourism,
investing.
It's my
absolute pleasure.
And we hope that you stick around for many more years, and I'm glad to see all the hotels are going well, so that's really good.
Thanks. Thank you. I look forward to the sequel of this, the third podcast in 6 years, and we can talk about how the world has changed in this time as well.
Hopefully not as dramatic as COVID, but you never know what's around the corner. Thanks very much, Jerry. Appreciate you coming.
Pleasure.
Cheers.